Hello, everyone. This was probably gonna go up with the other video as well, anyway. So the Imperial Guard, the hammer of the Emperor. I'm gonna be completely honest. Yes, the Imperial Guard is in fact very important because the fact is, the Imperial Guard is the reason a lot of planets are able to defend themselves. And one of the jokes that a lot of people say is that the Imperial Guard just die, and it's not wrong. The thing is, the Imperial Guard are quite literally the meat shield of the Imperium. Without them, a lot of planets would have gone down. But a lot of the fact is, a lot of the freaking planets go down due to really bad networking, work, progress, everything. It's incredibly stupid.
Hi, friends. Today we're talking about the best faction in all of 40k. Get these super soldiers and existential horrors out of here. I picked that guy. Just a normal ass guy with a gun. Yup, that's what I want. In a world of gods, demons, and aliens, you'd
No,
have to
you're
be
definitely
a
a god.
spectacular lame-o to pick the normal human faction, right? No! Well, I'm a little lame, but the Guard isn't. These guys are the backbone of the
They
Imperium.
are.
Sure, the Marines are the Emperor's greatest warriors and are super cool, but the Imperial Guard are the dudes who actually get down in the trenches, oftentimes literally, and get shit done. So, if you like a load of guns, glorious mass infantry charges, a ton of tanks, and the unrivaled power of the indomitable human spirit, fix your bayonets and get ready to hear about the best 40k faction. The Imperial Guard began in the Unification Wars as the Imperial Army and were the
Oh, I didn't know
regular human
that.
combatants of the Emperor. Just like in 40k, they were the main fighting force of the Imperium. However, 30k differs in that oftentimes the Guard were directly commanded by Marine legions. So, unlike 40k, the Marines and Guard were essentially one big entity, with Guards mostly providing the numbers that Marines logistically couldn't, and they were often the forces that finished off and defended conquered worlds after the Marines had done their thing. Yup, you heard it here, folks. Marines, they have trouble finishing. Guard is more base confirmed.
Bro, what the frick? That's such a okay.
Of the Imperial Army, the most elite guardsmen of the time hailed from the solar system and were known as the Solar Auxilia. These guys are really cool and really only second to Marines in terms of skill and training. Also, special shout out to the Lucifer Blacks, the ultra elites of the Solar Auxilia. These were some of the most, if not the most, elite guardsmen in the setting and maybe ever. But, anyways, the Guard being under command of the Space Marine Legions proved problematic when half the Space
So I just want to say the Lucifer Blacks were probably one of the best units. I think they're really cool and everything, but damn,
Marine
dude.
legions decided a heresy and conveniently had the authority to tell half of the Imperium's army and naval forces to worship Satan with them. So then, the Horus Heresy happened. Primarch this, Primarch that, Siege of Terra, yada yada. After all that crap happened, the Imperium had radical reforms headed by the ultra mega Chad Rabuda Gilliman. Key among these changes were to heavily segment and limit the forces of the Imperium. Famously, the Marine legions were split into smaller chapters, and a similar thing happened to the Guard. Firstly, the Imperial Army was made into its own entity with its own common structure separate from the Astartes. Next, it was split into the Imperial Guard and the Imperial Navy. In theory, this meant that the Guard could no longer wage its own wars since it could not traverse planets, and the Navy, while having the ability to traverse the galaxy, simply wouldn't have the manpower to wage wars and hold territory.
No,
Another
see, oh my
precautionary
god.
measure was breaking the Guard into relatively small, specialized regiments of a few thousand. However, sometimes they're much larger, surpassing the six figures, and others, like the super heavy tank regiments, were quite small. It's important to keep in mind for this and almost everything else I say in this video that the Guard is such a huge and wildly diverse faction that there are potentially enormous variations between sub-factions. Most things are generalizations for most regiments. Oh, and also keep in mind that for the Guard, regiment can refer to the sub-faction, i.e. Cadian, Mordian, Steel Legion, etc., or it can refer to the regiments within the sub-factions, i.e. the Cadian 8th or Elysian 110th.
Oh
Anyways,
yeah.
though, the most common regiments are infantry, tank, mechanized, and artillery regiments. This means that multiple regiments would have to work together in order to effectively wage war. Only the most trusted and elite regiments are allowed to field combined arms regiments, or, in the case of Krieg, siege regiments. Anyways, though, the idea of making the regiment small and specialized was again so that no one regiment could have the power to rebel on a large scale, since they would skew too hard into one thing. However, based on tabletop, an infantry only regiment probably could succeed, solely based on the fact that any opponent it faces would likely fall asleep during your 4-hour turn 1. In addition to their base regiments, special attachments may be, well, attached to strengthen the regiment. Some common attachments are abhuman squads, heavy weapon platoons, tank companies.
Dude, having an abhuman squad member is kind of cool, especially since the ratlings and the Odrin are really nice, or the cat folk that may or may not exist? Question mark.
Psychers, and the coolest units ever, Stormtroopers! Woo! Anyways, though, now we know that Guard big, but how do Guard get big? Well, typically, Guard regiments are built up from mandatory planetary tithes. These tithes can vary and are calculated by the Departamento Munitorum, who handles all the Imperium's military logistics. A planet's tithes are calculated based on the planet's size, level of development, what other contributions they make to the Imperium, location of the world, and, of course, with a bureaucracy as big as the Imperium, there's a load of corruption, so how much the government likes you is also a factor.
Sadly, yes.
But finally, another one of the most iconic measures taken to ensure loyalty was the introduction of commissars to watch over regiments, raise morale, offer guidance, and, most importantly, enforce loyalty, often with a well-placed bolt round. Which, also, I think many forget the first two things I mentioned with commissars. Ideally, there are inspirational figures who are elite warriors with a contagious amount of loyalty and dedication.
Oh my god, I literally just stand. Oh my god. Is that Caiaphas Kane?
These fellas are trained in the same place as scions and sisters, after all. And, since I'm a dumb baby, the nicer inspirational commissars are my favorite ones. But, for more unruly regiments, they do have to be enforced, and we get the more brutal commissars. Anyways, though, in the present setting, the Imperial Guard is the single most important military force in the entire Imperium. There are, and I quote, countless billions of guardsmen fighting across the galaxy. And I'm a pretty sharp fella who can count quite high, so I think it's safe to say there's a whole lot of guardsmen. The Guard is the hammer of the Emperor, and they have been holding the line against any and all of the biggest threats in the galaxy for millennia. They may not be the strongest, the fastest, or the most...
They're not. Like, literally, the Guard faction is not the biggest or strongest. However, the thing that makes them so important is the fact that they have numbers. They have tenacity. They have everything willing to put themselves on the line. That's really cool.
Glorious of warriors, but what they lack in quality, they compensate 1,000-fold in sheer quantity. Literally nothing in real space is able to tank 300 million last shots with the side of battle cannon. Some people believe that greater demons or other big centerpiece units can only be taken out by space marines or something like Titans, but that's wrong. By combining the indomitable human spirit, some good old-fashioned teamwork, and a super heavy Shadow Sword volcano cannon, the humble guardsmen can take out any threat they may face. Guardsmen are able to handle nearly all foes through coordination, resourcefulness, and strategy. They don't have the luxury of making mistakes, so the best of the guardsmen are some of the most competent soldiers in the entire setting. But if competency fails or is lacking, many, many, many dudes will do as well. It is a simple fact that Marines have cool guy privilege and get a disproportionate amount of stories. But the thing about disproportionate stories is that it's disproportionate. The Marines are an infinitesimal force in the face of the good old Guard. It is outright stated that the Guardsmen outnumber the Marines millions to one. So, even in the most insane stories where Marines can take out hundreds of Guardsmen before dying, after taking out hundreds of Guardsmen, they would still have roughly...
So the thing is, he's not wrong. There's actually a story. There's a short about it I saw. Basically, this guardsman was having like a friendly jest against the Marines. Basically, the guardsman was able to take out one of the Marines, using tactics, but then also was able to take out the other two Marines because of the fact that he said that on the battlefield, kind of something like on the battlefield that the Space Marines are very important, but the Guard have to be really smart in being able to take them out. Something like that. But The point is, the guards are willing to go down if it means taking out one. If it means taking out multiple
A
enemies with
million
them.
more to face. And this applies to basically every other faction, as the Guard are almost the most numerous force in a war zone. Even against orcs or nids, the Guard are often the larger organized force. Against orcs, it's rare to see the bulk of the Green Tide being on the same page of anything but fight is good. And luckily for the Imperium, the nids are seemingly not in full force most of the time. Let's just put it this way. If the Marines disappeared one day, the Imperium would have a bad time. If the Guard disappeared, the Imperium would not exist.
It's true.
Anyways, let's move on to
It's
their
true.
fighting style. And again, I have to reiterate that the Guard is a wildly diverse faction, so their fighting style isn't the most uniform. Usually, you'll see dudes in flak armor with a las gun and some grenades, maybe with a funny outfit. But also sometimes you'll see some dudes freeballing it. Literally, this is a real regiment at its peak. Point is though, Guard regiments can be highly unique from one another. For example, you have the highly trained combined arms tactics of the Cadians, guerrilla jungle master of Catachan, drop assault Elysians, mechanized steel legion, and so on and so forth. But generally, most Guard regiments deploy a large infantry force armed with the always trusty lasgun, and the near endless waves of the Emperor's bravest souls are supported by a gargantuan amount of tanks, artillery, and other war machines. So, just imagine hundreds of Lehman Russes shaking the ground with treads and fire, millions of guardsmen charging, blasting lasers, and swinging bayonets.
It's incredibly funny because on the I believe it's the Warhammer game, like the tabletop as well as the PC game, the guardsmen are literally considered a horde faction. And I played one of the games. I played the game on with Mech because, well, to be honest, I was sick that day. But I was sick that day, and he still and I still played because friendship and all that nonsense. But anyway, yeah, it was fun playing the horde faction. It's
All
nuts.
the while getting pounded by non-stop artillery shells blocking out the sun. That is the might of the Guard. They are a behemoth that crushes anything in their path through fathomless firepower and sheer will. The most tried and true strategy is to leverage their overwhelming numbers against whatever foe they
It's
face
true.
and grind them down through insane chip damage. In the Imperium, the only truly expendable resource is human life. But this doesn't mean that the Guard commanders are stupid. Far from it. The Guard actually has some of the greatest strategic minds in the entire setting. After all, it takes some skill to defeat super soldiers, ultra tech Xenos, endless armies, and the literal forces of hell with your average Tom, Dick, and Harry. These fellas have to take into considerations the weaknesses of the Guard, like generally weaker armaments, morale issues, logistical constraints, and like a million other things. But the best of the Guard commanders know that the Guardsmen are an expendable resource to be spent, not wasted. Yes, countless Guardsmen die in most battles, but commanders often don't just send men into the meat grinder for the lulz. They make calculated and callous sacrifices to win the day. They cunningly coordinate infantry companies, artillery batteries, stormtrooper squads, special units, and sometimes even hidden Baneblades in masterful displays of destruction.
Oh lord.
However, not everyone is the best, and there certainly are many commanders who do just send waves of guardsmen into certain doom with reckless abandon. But that's more the exception to the rule. Otherwise, the Imperium simply wouldn't exist. And another one of the coolest, if not the coolest aspects of the Guard is the crazy diversity within the faction.
It's
Since
true.
they are such a huge force and the Imperium has such a wide range of worlds and cultures within, they have a ton of room for interesting variations. In just one faction, you could have a Rambo army, Techno Cossacks, sci-fi drop troopers, World War I edgelords, the British. The possibilities are
I love it. The British. just just straight up the British, man. Alright, that's amazing.
endless. And with the diverse cultures, they've also got a diverse array of fighting styles. You got unrelenting infantry hordes, elite stormtrooper squads, horses, 1 million tanks,
Oh my
and
lord.
many, many more. And the cherry on top is that the Guard Command can and often will mix and match regiments for even more unique forces. It's not uncommon for regiments to work together either out of desperation or because the commander wants to have some fun theory crafting with some silly combos. The Guard is simply the most diverse faction in the
It
entire game
really
and also has
is.
the most hobbying potential. Most 40k factions are vast and have differences, but they're still bound by a general theme of sorts. Marines will always look like Marines with potentially different doodads here and there. Necrons are skeleton boys with different colors. Eldar and Tau are pretty standardized. Tyranids are a literal hive mind. And even the kit-bashing darlings, the orcs, are literally genetically predisposed to acting and dressing in a generally
Let's see. Of course, you can kit batch orcs or any faction in interesting ways. I just find orcs led themselves to kit bashing their weapons and gear more than making unique cultures and aesthetics. And relating
samey
speaking,
way.
of course.
Guard, on the other hand, can go pretty damn crazy style. Once you got humans and with lasguns and tanks, you can basically do
I know the
whatever
wrong
you
base.
want from
Oh my
there.
god.
Sometimes even those aren't required materials. Which bridges me to my absolute favorite aspect of the Guard. They are literally just people. Often highly
Just a
trained
guy.
elite people, but just people.
Hey,
These
guy.
ordinary people regularly conquer horrors beyond their comprehension, they brave impossible odds, and they crush foes far greater than themselves. To me, the guardsman who bayonet charges a flaming, sword-toting demon is infinitely more courageous than the genetic freak who literally can't feel fear. The guardsman gazes into the abyss and they shoot the shit out of it. They're badass. In addition, as far as 40k goes, the Imperial Guard is truly humanity incarnate. Beyond looking super cool, the various regiments being inspired by various cultures of the world, and the Guard being composed of anyone who can shoot a gun and yell loud enough, really plays into the idea that the Imperial Guard is the amalgamation of all of humanity. The faction is an inspiring story of all of humanity banding together, sacrificing all that they've got to keep themselves.
It's true. Like I was saying earlier, the Imperial Guard is literally a giant meat shield. But that doesn't make them weak or any sense or any way, shape, or form. They're actually incredibly useful and versatile, and they're the reason why the Imperium has lasted so long is because they have the numbers of people willing to go the distance and even just die for the Imperium.
And their fellow man alive. The men and women of the Guard will stop at nothing to keep humanity from the brink of death. And if they fail, gosh darn it, they're gonna cause quite the ruckus on the way to the grave. Plus, they got a fuckload of cool ass tanks. Bad ass. But
He likes those
anyways,
things.
that's the Guard for now. I absolutely love these little guys. I think they're truly the most compelling faction. I love how much they represent humanity and embody the worst and best aspects. Just normal people with a rifle and the indomitable human spirit keeping the Imperium alive. Bad ass. Plus, the hobbying and homebrew potential is just so fun with them.
Again,
More so
behold my
than
Lord
anyone else, the
Shine
faction
Private.
encourages
Oh, I'm happy
creativity,
for you,
which is
bud.
my favorite part of 40k as a franchise. As for what's the best regiment, obviously it's the Cadians. 100% factual jokes aside, though, the most powerful regiment is a debate that hardly makes sense to me, as almost all the regiments we see featured are literally the best and most renowned regiments in the entire Imperium. And even the loser guy no-name regiments are usually composed of the planet's best. But the guys who get book spotlights and codex sections are the cream of the crop, probably like the top 10th of a percent of the Guard, if not higher. The average guardsmen in these famous regiments are probably equally or more competent than our modern special forces. Seriously, the amount of child soldiers in this setting is insane.
It is.
So, they're
It really
all the
is.
most powerful in their respective fields. But looping around, Cadia's respective field just so happens to be being the best, so what can I say? But anyways, comment below what your favorite regiment
Nice.
is, and if you either agree that the Guard is the best faction, or if you're a big old wrong guy. Anyways though, if you're interested in the Guard, I've got some regiment focuses up, and I plan to make more, so stay tuned. I've also got some cool Guard stickers with more on the way, so check those out too. Anyways though, thank you for watching, and big thanks to the patrons who help support the channel. You're very epic. And as always, please like, comment, subscribe, and consider sharing to all your fellow guardsmen. Thanks. Also, I really hate when people say that the Lehman Russ needs to be redesigned with a smaller, more realistic gun. Yeah, sure, let's get rid of the coolest and most iconic part of a cool sci-fi tank in the name of realism. Blech. You make me sick.
Okay, guys, if you like this kind of content, do like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to check out the original video. If you guys want to support me, I'll leave a link to my Ko-fi. Let me know if you want me to react to part 2 of the other video. I'd be more than happy to. Probably comment, well, honestly. Anyway, guys, I'll see you later. Bye.